Welcome to Spaces Between. This is a podcast about bringing gamers closer together. Today I have Graeme Anderson from Four Corners of the Board and Dice Tower Reviews and all sorts of other awesome stuff. What's going on, man?
Not too much. You know, it's our federal election day, so I went and voted early so I could be back home to be on this podcast with you.
Canada and stuff. So if anybody doesn't know, Graeme's from Canada. I mean, I never make fun of you for that at all, ever.
No, I've never heard that. You've never made fun of me for being in Canada.
What's that about, eh? No,
well, it's always funny because I can say anything about Canada, and Roy tends to be, is that true? Is that what they do up in Canada? It's like, yes, Roy.
I find it interesting. Like, I'm really excited about learning about what happens in different parts of the world and like different cultures, and just like knowing like, oh man, what's the weather there? Oh man, what's the food like? I just find it interesting and exciting. I know it might sound like I'm picking and making fun, but I just like learning about that stuff, you know?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's definitely fascinating we're so close, but there are differences between Canadian and Americans. So It's always interesting to kind of pick up the differences.
And I figured since my last name's Canada, I can kind of get away with whatever, you know?
Well, every time Dice Tower Con is always over Canada Day weekend.
Yeah.
We make you a semi-official Canadian for that day just because of your name.
I'm always like, oh, did somebody say Canada? It's like, oh, no, I'll just see myself out now. Everybody's like, boo. I am a dad, so dad jokes are allowed, I guess. So.
Yes, that definitely. Yes, I'm a dad, too. So there might be a couple dad jokes thrown in, you know, just to keep things... grown worthy, I guess.
Yeah. Nice. I think the first time we like personally met is I know that I came down for like a 24-hour marathon for the Dice Tower. Actually, it might have been more than 24 hours. How long was that marathon? It was like crazy.
It was 36 hours.
36-hour marathon.
Yeah.
We all met in Orlando, and like it was like the first experience I had just like hanging out with the Dice Tower crew and meeting some of the extended Dice Tower people. And that was the first time I met Graeme, which was pretty fun.
Yeah, that was, I'd met some of the other Dice Tower crew before at like Origins and whatever else. But this was the first time I got to spend, 36 hours in a confined space with the Dice Tower crew.
Yeah,
and it was the first time, first time I got to meet you and, was it Rob?
Yeah, Rob.
Rob, yeah.
So we definitely had fun, and I was surprised because I was like, hey, Tom, let me come down to this thing. And he's just like, okay. And I was kind of shocked because, I mean, I did some reviews and stuff on the channel, but I was like, oh, crap, I get to be in the Dice Tower, like, thing. So we, like, hopped in the car and drove all the way down there. I'm sure you flew.
Yes, it's 27-hour drive for me, so, I flew.
But, yeah, it was awesome. I remember one of the most memorable things was our game of Blood Rage where Graeme was like, I don't know how to play Blood Rage at all. And then he just goes, like, piece by piece, like perfect Loki strategy, like stealing everybody's rage. It was pretty epic.
But I sat down to that game with you and Rob, and I forget, was it Sam who was playing with us?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Who would play Blood Rage with us? I have no clue who would have played Blood Rage with us.
And the three of you sat down, and Rob was saying, we play Blood Rage every week, and Roy always wins. It's like, okay, I've played Blood Rage. I have played Blood Rage, but not like you guys do. So I was definitely the newbie at that table.
Hey, I still think you got third, though, right?
I think I did, yes.
Which me and Rob tied for first. I can't believe that rulebook has, like, no tiebreaker.
Yeah, no, there are definitely some games which is just everybody shares the victory. It's like, that's not a victory then. Someone needs to win.
You can't do that in Blood Rage, you know?
I know.
I mean, that's insane. I feel like in that game, since we were playing it live, I was, like, paying less attention to what I was doing. I know there's some like misplays I made. I'm like, but it ended up being a tie, and it ended up being very entertaining for the stream because Sam's like, you guys should arm wrestle it out. And I'm like, how about no? Because Rob will 100% win. And Sam's like, I'll arm wrestle you by proxy. So technically, that's the only game of Blood Rage I've ever lost, was Sam losing in arm wrestling by proxy. Does that count? I don't know if it counts.
I'll let you decide whether that counts or not, Roy.
Good stuff, man.
Yeah,
cool.
But I mean, playing games live is definitely a different experience than playing games, at your house or at a con or whatever. Because when you think, normally you sit at a table, there's 3-4 people watching you play.
Yeah.
When you're doing live, maybe 1,000 people watching you play, and you're double thinking everything and. At that time, it wasn't our first game we had played. Right. This is getting on there. So, yeah, I'm sure that none of us were playing optimally.
Oh, for sure. And on top of that, it's it's less even about playing optimally and more about playing you really need to be entertaining. And I feel like probably during that live stream, I mean, me and Rob had streamed stuff by ourselves, but never in front of like a lot of people. And you really have to like try to play stuff up and always be talking and being entertaining and stuff like that. And certain games work better for that than others. That's why I think party games are so good live. But it's hard to play those games and just always be on all the time, you know?
It is. I mean, that was the first live thing I'd ever done. I was so used to having the comfort of a podcast. You know, you just record it and then you can edit it and make yourself sound smart. But having to be talking all the time for that marathon was definitely an interesting experience for me.
Yeah, and of course you like anything you do like live online, it like just amplifies. Like if you're having a little bit of like a bad game or something like that, and you're like, I don't like this or don't like that, or you complain a little bit, everybody like it amplifies like a bajillion times. They're like, oh man, Graeme was upset about this, even though you're not allowed to be upset as a Canadian. I'm pretty sure you just have to say sorry and move along, right?
Tom does call me the calmest man in board gaming, so I don't get upset, no.
There you go. That's awesome. Is there an opportunity you would have had to get upset, but you've just stayed cool that just makes you like the pinnacle of calmness?
Well, I can't say there's been a couple of times I've lost my temper.
Was it during a game of diplomacy?
No, actually it was I forget what the game was called, but it was where you're building up a western town. You're actually physically building the buildings. Saloon Tycoon. Oh,
gotcha.
And I was playing with a bunch of friends, and I may have had a couple drinks before playing. This is the end of the night.
Yeah.
And we were all playing, and there's 4 of us playing. And I was playing against a couple that I know very well. And it was basically down between me and her as who's going to win. And like the last round, her husband says, I'm going to play this card. I'm going to take the card away from you, Graeme, that you need to score, and I'm going to give it to my wife so she can score it.
Oh, it's like ultimate king making. Like ultimate. Like he was out of the running for the game, and he's just like, no, Graeme, you don't win, she wins.
Yep. I lost my Canadian that day.
Is there like a Canadian card that they take away if you don't say sorry immediately after it, or?
I'll say that because it happened down in Grand Con, it was on American soil, so it doesn't count.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, I think that's exactly how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of games out there that can make your emotions run high and stuff like that. I mean, I never like take any of that stuff outside of the game. It's like when we're playing the game, sometimes I might use stuff like that as a little bit of a tactic. I know people like are like, don't be complaining about losing or like pointing out who's winning and all that stuff. But I don't know. I think there's an interesting negotiation meta in playing stuff like that, especially in like area control-ish games.
Yeah. I definitely use the don't look at me, I'm not winning. Roy on the other side of the table, he's the one who's winning, so we should gang up on him. I use that all the time, and then people start to go, wait a minute, Graeme, you are winning. It's like, no, Roy is.
I think it's like an interesting dynamic. I played a lot of like multiplayer CCGs, and whenever you're playing anything like that multiplayer, you have to kind of divert attention so you can sneak in there for the win. And it's very much like that in like Twilight Imperium a lot too. Like, you're trying to complete these objectives. You're trying to be like, hey, man, I'm just on your border, but, man, I'm not going to attack you. I mean, I'm not trying to go for your home system or anything. Look at Graeme over there. And then you, like, have to jump in and sneak, do something, and then be like, no, I'm not going any further. I'm not going further. One more planet. Just one more planet. You know, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and it definitely with Twilight Imperium, well, I haven't played, actually I've played 4th edition now.
Oh, nice.
And one of the guys I play with, he's very good at it, and he is excellent at the, hey, it's no skin off my nose, I'll make you this deal. And you think, that's not a bad deal. And you think, wait a minute, Andrew, you're always coming out ahead on these deals. He's very good at the don't look at me, look at someone else, because I'm not a threat.
I had one game of Twilight Imperium 3, and they've nursed this card. It's still bad, but they've nerfed it in the 4th edition. But there was like an agenda that's called like public execution. And basically, I had gotten like 3 points ahead of everybody in the game. And I was getting there. I was like a couple points away from winning. And like I was pulling pretty far ahead at that point. And this law came up that was like, it was at the very beginning of the round, they had done a thing to make the laws happen, and it basically like exhausted all of my planets and like wiped out half of my ships and basically just completely wrecked my game. So it's like I basically had to skip an entire round. 'Cause it's like if at the beginning of the round you exhaust all of your planets, you're pretty much done, you know? So I was just like, wow, okay, cool guys. Well, one of you guys better win now, 'cause and so that ended up where I was like just on the edge of winning the game. It ended up making the game go like 2 hours more. I was like, oh, come on guys, just win. Just win. And I still got like one more point, so I was like one away. I couldn't pull it over the finish line, but I was just like, because I had like no ships left. And they just kept being like, no, bad Roy. If I start doing anything, they just keep smacking me down. Oh man, it's interesting dynamic in those games of like having to not look like you're doing good, because if you pull out ahead, you're just gonna get wrecked.
But then if you leave it too long, you
Right.
know, if you think I'll make my jump at the last turn or whatever else, and someone finishes the game one turn early, you're like, ugh, I knew I should have played that card earlier. But then you set a big target on your back.
Yeah, like those like secret objectives and stuff like that in games are kind of like interesting. It's like if you can throw it down to try to gain victory points and stuff, it's like, do I hold it till the very end, but then I might not be able to play it because I might no longer fulfill the conditions, or do I play it now? I love that sort of stuff in games.
So do I. I really like I also like the variable end of games. So it's not, it's not 5 rounds or 10 rounds. It's whenever someone gets a certain points or whatever else. Because then it really comes down to, well, if I hold on to the secret objective that needs to be played before the end of the game, if I throw it down too early, I'm putting a big target on my back, and people are going to make sure I don't get any more points from it. But if you leave it too long, there's always that chance that someone's going to say, oh, this round I do all my objectives and I get 40 points and the game's over, and you're like, So good choices to be made in board games.
Yeah, for sure. So you've been doing stuff with the Dice Tower for quite a while now. If there's anybody out there that doesn't know like what all sort of things you do, or like about your podcast or about your reviews, how would you kind of like sum up your content that you make?
Well, it's a long and varied history with the Dice Tower. I actually started 5 years ago.
Is there drama? I'm just kidding.
A little bit. So I actually started doing a podcast 5 years ago. 5 years ago in October. So this is almost my 5th year anniversary when we're recording this. There was the Four Corners of the Board, and it was my wife and another couple did it. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that other couple has now moved to France, so that version of the Four Corners doesn't exist anymore.
Gotcha.
I was doing a filler show on on my own podcast with my friend Dean Liggett, and we called it Talking Across the Game Board. Mm-hmm. So the Four Corners is now morphed into Talking Across the Game Board, but I still kept the name Four Corners.
There you go. That's cool.
And then after I was doing Four Corners for a couple of years, I decided to try my hand at video. Mm-hmm. I've edited 150 podcasts now, that it's time for me to try editing something else. So I decided to do some video. Did a couple, sent a couple to Tom and said, what do you think? And he gave me constructive criticism.
as he likes to do. Yeah.
Yes. And then I resubmitted. He says, sure, you can start posting on the Dice Tower. So that's what I've been doing for a year and a half now, I think.
Yeah.
So I've got Talking Across the Game Board podcast. I've got Board Game Buffet podcast. And then I do the video reviews for the Dice Tower.
And I know you've been submitting like segments for some of the other shows, like Dive and stuff like that.
Yeah. I found, just because of my work schedule and the other things I'm doing, I couldn't commit to doing a weekly podcast, like a weekly segment like Breakfast or the Blender ones or the ones before. So when Dive came up and Tom said it was going to be every 2 weeks or so, I thought I could do a segment every 2 weeks.
Even more sparse than every 2 weeks, but yeah.
Oh, I submitted one that never went out. The last one was never went out.
What was the theme of the last one supposed to be?
Z-Man Games.
Maybe it'll happen eventually. We'll keep that one in the bucket. Well, it's kind of funny because like whenever we have these conventions and whenever we have all this stuff, like we have to do like double time. Like this past week, I was telling you beforehand, I like had to do all of 2 weeks worth of stuff because Essen was coming up. Tom had recorded and like preloaded everything for next week into this week. And when we have those crunch times, it's like, well, something's got to go. Dive is always the very first thing that gets cut.
Yeah.
But
I can't imagine
series.
doing what you guys do. One of the joys of being part of the Dice Tower is I don't need to say I'm going to be released like Tom. I don't have to say I'm going to do 4 reviews a week. I can do review and, Tom will schedule it and it gets released. I don't have to worry about going to cons and having to catch up.
Oh yeah,
like you guys do.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. There's no lack of content on our channel at all, but it's definitely awesome to see all sorts of different voices and things, and it's definitely interesting to see different people's takes on reviews. Because I mean, we have like the core 3 or whatever, Tom, Z, and Sam, but then we have all sorts of different reviewers. And I mean, I had Brian Drake on here, and Ambi does a lot of the 18xx stuff, and it's just cool to see all sorts of different people giving their taste on games,
Yeah, I'm really glad. Like Liz is now on board. That she's doing quite a few reviews.
Yeah, she's been doing a ton of like solo stuff, which is pretty cool.
Exactly, which is not something I'm really interested in. But I was talking to Mike Delisio a couple weeks ago, and I know he's a big solo gamer. And my friend Dean, he travels a lot, so he's really looking for solo games. So it's nice to see Dice Towers really kind of getting in on that segment to basically promote the solo gaming.
Yeah, I totally need to have Liz on here too. So many people. It's so funny. Yes. I started this podcast so that way I could start like bringing on different people in the Dice Tower and just having a thing where I feel like podcasting is a great medium for people to, not only the people that are talking to get to know each other better, but also like the people listening, they can become like more like friends with, I don't know. It's like when I met people that listen to my podcast, my old podcast, it's like I felt like I already had like a friendly bond with those people. So it's really cool to have that, and I want to have that with more of our contributors, like give them more of a voice on the channel, Yeah,
and that's a good thing you bring up. When I first started podcasting and listening to gaming podcasts, I wasn't a big fan of the banter. The first 5-10 minutes of a show, the talking about what's happening in their lives. I always kind of fast forward to that.
And that is all this show is.
But now, and I was just about to say, now I make sure that we do that in one of our podcasts, that there is banter, because I'm now realizing I'm enjoying listening and figuring out, and podcasts like this, you get to know more about the people behind their opinions, and it kind of gives you kind of a well-rounded view into what these people, what they like, what's going on in their lives, and it makes it interesting.
I think it's kind of interesting because I feel like if someone is stumbling upon your content that doesn't know you at all, they probably care less about the random banter. But if they're like a fan of your show, or like they are continually listening to it, they probably enjoy the banter and enjoy knowing what's going on more, and that just builds a stronger fan base. It's kind of like interesting. Like, I don't know. I feel like if I'm watching something and it's somebody I have no clue who they are, I'm just like, okay, what are they talking about? Like, let's get to the game they were supposed to talk about.
Exactly.
But like if I go back and listen to, like, let's say the Secret Cabal, I'm a huge fan of them. I just could listen to those guys talk about silliness all the time,
Yeah, exactly. And again, when I first started, I didn't know these people, so I would just, get on with it. I just want to hear the review of the game or whatever else. But honestly, now that I have played a lot more games, I'm more interested about the people behind kind of the mic, kind of listening about the banter. On the reverse side, it's very interesting doing these type of shows, or my podcast where there is banter. When you meet people at cons, they'll come up to you and they'll start mentioning something that you mentioned in banter, and you're like, wait, I said that? How do you know that about me? It's like, I guess we talked about that. So
I always love when people come and hit you with like your own inside jokes from your podcast, and you're like, yes. Yeah. You're my people. Like, you're already like part of this tribe of like gamers, like this niche inside of a niche inside of a niche. It's like, oh man, these are the 4 corners of the board fans. Like, what in the world? Yeah. It's like, holy smokes, you listen to my podcast, you're the best. And
I remember the very first time I got recognized was down in Origins, and someone came up, and I was working the booth for Dice Tower, and the guy came up and said, I listened to your podcast and I really enjoyed it. And you're thinking, that's just so weird that people actually listen to you or watch you or whatever else. You kind of throw this content out, but it really is kind of a one-way street.
I thought it was so funny. I'm like redoing a segment. I was going to make a new segment for Board Game Breakfast that my wife Heather could be involved in. And so I was like researching. I was like, what should I do? I was like looking back at stuff, and I was like, oh man, I should start doing Easy to Epic again, which was like my segment that I had on Blender. It was like the very first segment I ever did on the Dice Tower ever. So I went back and I was like, I wonder what my very first ever video on the Dice Tower was. And I went all the way back and I found my very first like board game blender segment. And like I watched it and like there was a bunch of positive comments about it. And it was funny because like one person in there is like, oh my goodness, like that's Roy from Epic Gaming Night. He doesn't look anything like what I thought he sounded like. And you always get that as a podcaster. And I thought it was so funny because it was like, that was so long ago now. I guess it was like over 3 years ago or something like that. And I'm like, oh man, that's crazy that people were recognizing me from my podcast when I was on the Dice Tower all the way back then. You know, it's just very interesting.
Yeah, that was, speaking of YouTube comments, that's one of the main reasons why I was kind of hesitant to do my own videos. Mm-hmm. Because everybody says, you know, you never read YouTube comments. Everybody
You'd be afraid everybody'd be like, oh my goodness, Graham's so handsome, like they can't control themselves, you know. It's like, I got to stay on audio just to keep people off, you know.
But I was surprised at how nice the board gaming community is, honestly. Mm-hmm. I think I've had a couple negative comments on my videos, but not so much for me, but for like my rating of a game. I remember there's a game, a Kickstarter game. I think I should stop reviewing Kickstarter games because all Kickstarter backers think it's the absolute best game that's ever come out. And if you say anything negative about Kickstarter games, they jump all over you. But
you're devaluing their investment if you say bad things about the game.
Which I understand. I mean, you've invested whatever $100 on the game. You want to make sure that it's good. But
how does you saying your opinion on it change the mechanics of the game? It doesn't.
I don't know. Some people just kind of take it to heart that if it's a Kickstarter game that they've backed, it's the best game it's ever made. And I look at it and go, this game is broken. This game is garbage.
I think that's trademarked. You can't say this game is broken anymore.
And
Dave Luz is going to come out of the woodwork and be like, hey, you owe me 50 cents.
50 Canadian cents. How about that?
Loonies or something like that? Or that's dollars?
That's $1. Yeah, that's a bit much. That's a bit rich for me.
I mean, it's that whole exchange of the pound and the loonie. You know, it's expensive.
It is. But at least I find the YouTube comments, they're, even if they are negative, they are most people are trying to be constructive, which is nice compared to, I watch an awful lot of video game reviews and the amount of garbage they get. And vitriol that if you say, you know, Anthem is bad, you know, the amount of hate mail you get over it. And I don't see that on the board gaming side, which is really nice.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely, plenty of like crazy comments out there all the time. And I mean, on the Dice Tower channel, we try to if you say, oh, your opinion about this is bad or your opinion about that's bad, we don't really care. But if somebody actually attacks, especially one of the contributors, they're like, oh, they look stupid or something like that. I mean, I've seen stuff like that. It's just like, they look stupid. Okay. Yeah. Delete. I mean, we try to not have like actual like personal attacks against people on any of our stuff and keep things positive. But it's definitely interesting. Like, negative reviews, you get a lot more backlash on them. But at the same time, there's people giving you backlash on one side, and then other people being like, yeah, don't buy into the hype, yeah, and being proud of you having a negative review at the same time. It's like different people have different opinions, and they're going to say different things. You can't take any of it too seriously, you know?
Yeah, and I don't mind doing negative reviews, and a perfect example was that one I was just talking about, the negative Kickstarter review I did. And I had a couple people staunchly saying, no, this Graeme is great, you're wrong. But then that was vastly outweighed by the people saying, you're right. I regret backing this because it's such a bad game. So that's always nice to see when it's not just me who thinks it's bad, but, you know, there are other people who are kind of backing me up saying, you know, this is good. So it's not like I missed something.
I mean, I feel like as a reviewer, I mean, that's the reason that we do this stuff, and that's the reason Tom and everybody does stuff, because we're trying to help consumers make an informed decision about their purchase. And I mean, whether their opinion aligns with yours or not, maybe they can watch your breadth of work and know, like, okay, these are the kind of games Graeme likes, these are the kind of games Graeme doesn't like, these are the kind of games Tom likes, these are the kind of games Tom doesn't like, and figure out where they align with that sort of stuff, and then hopefully make their own informed decision. And I mean, I feel like that's basically the service that the Dice Tower does to like the board gaming community. Because no one else has nearly the amount of reviews or content as we have on our channel. And hopefully people can come here, and whether they like the game or not, whether their opinions align or not, hopefully they can make informed decisions on how to get what games or what games they want to actually look at. I mean, because we're not necessarily here to help out this publisher or that publisher. We're here to help out the people who watch our stuff and help them figure out what they want to back and what they want to have fun playing with their friends and their family.
And it's also nice having, I don't know how many reviewers there are on the Dice Tower Network anymore. I know, like you said, there's the three core ones. There's myself, Brian, Liz, are kind of the current rotation of reviewers.
Mike's done a few here and there, and we've had Dan do some, and of course Man and Suzanne talk about games on the Dice Tower podcast. We have so many different people out there
that you should be able to find someone who aligns with your tastes, and that's the person of videos that you watch. And if you know that I'm a very heavy gamer who likes very little randomness, but then you look at Tom who likes the higher randomness games, that if you're looking for a game that's not random and you look at my review, I might say it's great. Someone else might say it's bad, but if you align with my tastes, then maybe my video will have more sway than someone else's.
Yeah, and you can look at it and see like, oh, what's the reasons they didn't like it? Oh, they said this, this, and this. They didn't like the randomness. Well, the way randomness doesn't bother me as much. Or they thought it was too swingy, or this thing or that thing. Like, you can see how much that's important to you, So.
Yeah, and that's why I always find it's useful whether you like it or not, as long as you tell me why. And then I can say, well, like you just said, if I don't like randomness and you don't like randomness, and that's the thing you called out, then I might not like the game.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, reviews are definitely interesting. It's interesting. There's like so much board game content out there. It's cool to see how different people line up on different things. So.
Yeah, when I first got into board gaming many moons ago, that's how I came across the Dice Tower channel. I was looking for reviews, and I started watching Tom's videos, this old stuff. And I said, okay, well, I'll buy the games Tom Vassal says are great. But I didn't know any better. My collection was like 5 games. It's like, okay, where do I go from now? I'll start buying the games that Tom's given high reviews to. I very quickly learned that Tom and I have very different tastes.
Gotcha, yeah.
Because some of his favorite games are not on my top 100. I'll put it that way.
Wait, you don't like Duel of Ages?
No.
Did you buy Duel of Ages?
No, I haven't bought Duel of Ages, but I did buy Cosmic Encounter.
Oh man, I love Cosmic Encounter. What's wrong with you, Graeme?
Well, I also don't like Twilight Imperium, so. Oh wait, I think the video's gone.
Say what? Oh yeah. Click, and that's all we have time for today. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
At least you didn't say Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea.
I haven't played it yet.
It's kind of interesting because Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea takes that randomness aspect of the combat out of the game. So it might be interesting to see how you like that one. There is a randomness in, like, there's different locations, like exploration tokens, but most of them are decently positive or neutral. They can kind of be annoying a little bit, but it evens out overall for the most part. So there's a teeny bit of randomness in the exploration at the beginning. But other than that, it's just like manage your resources, build your civilization, go into combat that you can outthink your opponent by playing the right card, and you base it off of like my number combat strength versus your number combat strength. Maybe this sort of special ability triggers to give me like a +2. Okay, cool. We all know that going up front. We choose the right card. It's paper, rock, scissors-ish sort of thing, and you pay the resources for those. So it's very deterministic.
Yeah.
And it's crazy that I like it so much because I really enjoy the excitement and randomness sometimes. But after playing that game so many times, I just like the fact that I can be like, I know what you're going to play, and this is what beats it. I don't know. It's just fun. And it happens a lot. Oh, man. I was playing that game at the retreat with this awesome guy named Omar, and he had actually traded his game away, so he no longer had it. But we got into combat, and he opens up his phone and pulls out this spreadsheet that he had that basically told him in what situation to play which card. So he's like looking at that, and he's like, I'm like, what is that? And he's like, oh, it's like a spreadsheet that says what if you have this strength and I have that strength, what card I should play. And I'm just like, that's weird. He's like, if you don't want me to use it, I won't use it. I'm like, I don't care. You do whatever. So I still played a card and beat him. So it was funny that he had this huge spreadsheet, and he's like, oh, yeah, that's the only thing you could have played that I wouldn't have been able to stop. I'm like, yeah, I know. But I don't need a spreadsheet because I played this game a bunch. So But
Wow,
we'll have to play it someday, Graham. We'll make it happen.
oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, every time I go to the game store, I kind of see the big box of Land, Air, and Sea. I'm thinking, oh,
It's an investment. That's one of the main
that's
things.
just it. Yeah.
I feel like so many people have played the game with me and then decided it's good enough to actually like make the investment in. It's a hard game to it's hard to drop $100 on a game without knowing that you're gonna like it.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any game. That's why I don't really back many Kickstarters, is because I can't spend $100 on a game that I don't know is good for me. You know.
I also find with being a reviewer,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the luxury of being able to sit down and probably get my $100 worth out of the game.
Yeah.
Like I can't play it. Well, not that I can't play it. It's difficult to keep on getting the same game back to the table. And it's like, well, but I need to play this to review.
Yeah.
So that kind of takes precedence. But I must say we are almost finished Lord of the Rings Journey into Middle-earth.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
So that was, what,
the
11
first
games,
scenario?
12?
What about
Yeah,
the
just the
DLC
first.
scenario? You have that to go into next.
I know. But we're going in. We're going into the final one, and it says, win or lose, this is your final map.
Oh, that's
So-
awesome, man.
You finished the first one, right?
I played a ton of it solo, and
Okay.
I got way into it, and then I'm like, I need to slow down, and then I hadn't picked it back up the same way. So I haven't finished my current campaign or whatever that I had going because I was trying to slow down, and I'm surprised they haven't announced any more content for the game.
I can't believe that there's not an expansion already, like a box I can go buy for the kind of next scenario or the next things.
Yeah.
This is Fantasy Flight, right?
It's interesting because Andrew Navarro or whatever, he had a Q&A recently, and he said their new thing is that they used to, whenever they made a game, they always made a ton of content for the game, so when the game came out, they could push out all of that content. They said now their new strategy as Fantasy Flight is that they're put out the game. If the game does well and warrants expansions, they're going to put out expansions, which means you're going to have a year to 2 year delay after the game comes out before any more stuff is even announced, which is kind of interesting because at that point, is the game kind of falling off or falling behind? You can definitely tell they changed up that strategy, even with Arkham Horror 3rd Edition. The new expansion for that isn't even out yet, and that game's been out for well over a year. So It's definitely a different strategy than what they used to have, where they were just here's the game, 6 months, here's an expansion, 6 months, here's an expansion, 6 months, here's an expansion, because they had all that stuff front-loaded.
Yeah.
I think they got burned with stuff like Rune Wars, where they had this huge pipeline of stuff, and they put it all out well after it had already died off. I was the only person that played that game. But I say that to Tom, and he's like, you're right. You're the only person that played that game. I'm like, thanks, Tom. Won't you play? No, I won't play. Okay. I'll go sit over here.
I would like a happy medium. Like I said, we're just about to finish the first campaign, and one of the reasons why we did is because my wife is a big Middle-earth fan. She loves all the movies, the books, whatever else. And another one of our friends also likes Middle-earth, Lord of the Rings. So it was a very easy game that if I said, you want to come over and play a game, he's like, are we going to play, Lord of the Rings? Yep. So we played Lord of the Rings. Now that it's ending, okay, well, he also likes Mechs versus Minions, so I always have that game to play. But it was, something I can almost always guarantee to get to the table.
Yeah,
if we weren't sure what to play, let's bring out Lord of the Rings. Now it's sort of, well, we're done. Now we have to wait to see whether it did well enough to warrant an expansion.
Yeah, it's so strange. And it feels like a game where it's where's the other characters? Come on, give us a Gandalf, give us all these other people. It'd be cool to see so many more characters from that world come into this game. And just more options for different archetypes and different things and more selections when you're upgrading your characters and stuff. Who knows? I'm really surprised nothing's been announced. Maybe they'll announce something at Essen. Who knows?
I need you to finish off the game so I can ask you how your story went. Because I'd be very interested to find out what the differences are. I'm assuming the main story is the same, but there's definitely going to be different choices that you've made or that you could or couldn't finish the scenario and see what that affected your final outcome for your storyline was.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to see how branching it actually is, or if it ends up culminating sort of into the same, if it branches out and then goes back, or if it just branches out and just stays completely different,
Yeah. So hurry up and finish, Roy.
I know, I need to burn through it more. I just played a ton of Arkham Horror LCG, and then I finished what I had. I'm like, okay, time to buy the next data or the next Mythos pack, and like it's all sold out everywhere. And I'm just like, I knew I shouldn't have waited too long to play this game.
Yeah, I have the LCG sitting on my shelf. I've played only the very first scenario, and that's it. I've never picked it up again.
I like the story in it, but yeah, and I like the whole like the action selection of it. Like you get 3 actions, you have to figure out how to best use those every single turn.
Yep.
So it's fun. So
yeah, I was looking forward to getting it back to the table, but again, it's sitting on my shelf of to play next, and that pile keeps on growing.
As a reviewer and a podcaster, do you feel that pressure to like always be playing the next new thing all the time? And like, how do you balance that with playing like the games you want to play and revisit?
It's tough. When we were doing the 4 corners of the board, we were doing it every 2 weeks.
Gotcha. And
that almost became like a second job for us, because we needed one weekend to play all the new stuff, and then we would pick one game a couple weeks ahead of time that we do like a deep dive on. So we had recent plays and then a deep dive. That basically dictated what we were playing. And there's so many games that we played that we all really enjoyed, but we never got a chance to go back to because you had to get ready the next set of games to play. Now that I do less of the current stuff on the podcast, I actually am able to go back to play some of the old stuff. Now, for the video reviews, that is okay. Let me go online, find out what's just come out, see if I can get a copy of it from my local game store, and then okay, everybody come over, let's play this and play this and play this and play this. Okay, I played it enough to review it. Now, what game do you guys want to play?
Yeah, it's definitely intense always having to do like the next thing,
Yeah, and if we ever have friends come over to our house, because we do a lot of gaming at the house, and there's always the expectation from the people that come over that they know they're going to have to play something new. Because if you're coming over to my house, you are going to be playing a new game.
I think that can probably like stress a game group too. I mean, I definitely, back when I was in North Carolina, I could see how always having to do something new and not returning and visiting the games that we really enjoy was kind of a little bit of a burden on even the other people, not even just the guys on the podcast.
Yep. And it also gets to the point when it wasn't as fun playing games anymore. Because having to play new stuff all the time, and I've have 800 games in my collection, so I've learned probably 1,000, 1,200 games. Having to learn all that and explain all these games to people, it's tiring after a while. Sometimes it's like a good old book. Take the book off the shelf and sit down. You know what it is. You can play it. Everybody enjoys it, and it's just that's a relaxing time. Having to learn the rules, explain the rules. Are we doing this correctly? And play again can get a little tiring after a while. I know a lot of people are complaining, but you get to play new games all the time. That part's really good. But sometimes you do like to bring out the old classics and play them. They're classics for a reason. Yeah.
Yeah, since I'm no longer doing Epic Gaming Night and I started doing this, which is more just conversational with people. We're not like talking about a specific new game or this new hot thing that's coming out at Essen. And the fact that like I'm not really reviewing games, I'm just like editing Tom's stuff, It's like I no longer have that pressure to continually keep up. So like whenever we do Dice Tower Con, it's like, hey, I'm going to play Heroes of Land and Sea again. I'm going to play Battlelore. I'm going to play this other game that I really enjoy that I've played a ton of times. But I don't have to be like, okay, I need to play this new game so I can talk about it on the podcast. I used to always feel that way. Like, hey, guys, we need to get this new thing so we can talk about it on the podcast. Or I'd go to a convention and be like, I need to demo new things so I have new games and new content to talk about. Because honestly, I mean, it's very important. It helps like consumers understand more about the games and helps them make informed decisions. It's a really good service, but it's definitely very stressful on the people that have to do it.
Yeah, because as you know, people just want to know they're not happy with what they have. It's always as soon as Gen Con was done, what games are coming out at Essen? As soon as Essen's is finished, when are they going to hit the shelves in North America? It's always what's next, and having to be, at the leading edge of that gets tiring after a while.
And it's definitely like super cult of the future everywhere. It's not even cult of the new. Like people, like our content that does the best, like is we just did top 10 like Essen videos and stuff, and we had like 1,400 people watching like our videos about like live stream about like the brand new stuff that's coming out of Essen that you can't get yet. But if we do a top 10 talking about like, hey, our favorite old classics, like people's like, oh, it's old and busted. We're not gonna watch that video, you know.
Yeah, but, which is unfortunate. I mean, I was probably one of the 1,000 people watching your Essen list because I admit I was watching to see what's coming out.
It's good to know. I mean, you want to make those informed decisions if you're going to purchase it or go to the show. Like, hey, where are you going to go? It's definitely very informative and important. But it's definitely interesting to see how much people are like chomping at the bits for the next thing, you know.
And it was also good to see. So on one of my podcasts, we did an Essen preview as well, and it came out. We recorded it a couple days before Tom and the group did their Essen list. So it's nice to see that there was a lot of sync-ups between their list and our list. It's like, okay, that's good.
Do you ever have like a game you've done a review for and you watch someone else's review and they say very similar things or they agree with you on a lot of points and you feel validated in like your opinion of the game?
Yes. And it was funny because there'll be actually one that's coming out relatively soon that both Tom and I reviewed. And we both have very similar feelings about the game. And that I don't know whether it's validating, but it is nice to see that not so much for the positive ones, it's for the negative ones, I find. It's very easy to do I'm not going to say it's easy to do a positive review, but it's easier to get to actually sit down and do the review for a game that you like. Because it's easier. You know, it's easy to talk about something you like. When you're doing something negative, you have to be very careful that you're not overly negative and make sure you really make those points of what is negative. So if I see another negative review on the same game and they're pulling out the same things I've pulled out, then you think, okay, it's not just me. It's not just I was having a bad night when I was writing the script or whatever else. It is something that more than myself, which is why when I do negative reviews, I tend to look at, reviews on Board Game Geek. Is there something I missed? Is there some reason why I don't like this that other people are saying, well, because you're playing it wrong? So it is nice to see validation on negative reviews that I'm not the only person doing it and other people are having exactly the same problem.
Yeah, I agree. Like it's definitely very interesting. And like with those negative ones, you have to be super careful. Like I know Tom has we try to space out on the channel like the positive and negative reviews. I know Tom does. He's like, I don't want like a week of negative things and a week of positive things is fine. Like we can talk about this game's great, that game's great, but we don't want to be like this game's bad and this game's also bad and also this game is terrible. You know, we want things to be positive and nice. So sometimes we have to be like, okay, Tom's like, I got to go back and play that one again and see what's going on. Like you have to solidify the reason why it's not working for you. And I know personally, like I've done a negative review or like played a game and had a negative experience in a game and watched somebody else do like an extremely positive review. And like they say some of the mechanics that I hated were like good, and I'm just kind of like, what? Like it kind of like shades my opinion of like I'm like next time I see this guy's reviews or that person's reviews, it's like I don't think we align with the same things that we like, you know.
Yep. And I think it's funny how when you say you like a game, that's your personal opinion that you like the game. But when you give a game a negative review, it's like, again, this is my personal opinion.
Right.
I'm not saying the game is bad. I didn't like it for these reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, there are definitely some bad games, but I know, a lot of the time it doesn't suit me. I don't like huge amounts of randomness. I don't like randomness to determine the outcome of a game. Like I want to have but some people enjoy that. Some people does love sitting down and rolling the dice and kind of see what happens. That's not the style of game I like. So I'm going to give maybe that game a negative review, but I'm giving it a negative review because of the way I think about it.
Yeah. So as far as like the randomness and stuff goes for you, do you like your games to be mostly deterministic? So like whoever's the best at the game or whoever strategizes the best is always pretty much declared the winner, you think?
Yes. Some of my favorite games are from Splotter. Like Food Chain Magnet. Food Chain Magnet, there's a bit of randomness for the initial board setup, but after that it is you against the other players, and whoever strategizes and fulfills their strategy the best is the person who's going to win. There's no randomness. There's no events that come up to mess people over. That's the style of game I enjoy, but not all the time. I do enjoy games that have like random events that come up.
Mm-hmm.
Because I like randomness that affects everybody equally.
Gotcha.
Everybody's affected by the random event. Everybody's affected, like when you're talking about land, air, and sea. I'm assuming the discovery tiles are for everybody, not just.
It's normally there is an events that are in the app that's for everybody, but the actual like land tiles, it's per person. So hey, you could see a monster, and if you weren't prepared, you can get messed over a little bit. But if you go into the game knowing, okay, I kind of need to not go out exploring when I have 0 resources, you'll probably be fine,
Yeah, and again, whether you turn to that tile over, that exploration tile, or someone else did, whoever did it's going to be affected by that monster. I'm okay with that.
Gotcha.
What I'm not okay with is when you say, I really need to get resources this time. Well, roll the die to see whether you get any resources.
Yeah.
Well, no, my strategy depends on me getting resources, and if the randomness says I can't do that action, it's like, well, okay. Now Roy rolls and gets all resources. It's like, okay, well, how is that? I don't find that enjoyable.
Gotcha.
So
yeah, I always find that those games, a lot of times, it's like, man, if somebody's played the game before, they're definitely gonna just crush you. And then majority of the time, especially if it's like, oh man, you're sitting down with a seasoned veteran of this game, they know the strategy inside and out. And I feel like sometimes those games can kind of be solved, Do you feel that way with some of these like Euro games that are very low luck?
I think it depends on the people you're playing with.
Gotcha.
If you said, if there's a veteran person that's sitting down at the table with people that don't have that same experience, that veteran person not necessarily solves the game, but they should win. Right. They should know how everything plays out. And that's one of the problems I have with Food Chain Magnate is I really enjoy the game. My wife and other friends. But you're not going to
study and read strategy manuals on the game or whatever.
No, but if I sit down with someone who's never played the game before, it's like, well, I know how all the gears intertwine in that game. Mm-hmm. So I know what I need to at the beginning to make it pay off, an hour from now. Mm-hmm. But yes, I find with the low luck games, they are, solvable. And that's why, although I like Food Chain Magnate as a person against person, head against head type thing, I also don't mind games that do introduce that bit of randomness because it's not perfect information.
Right.
That there is something that may change from round to round, or, what options are available to you at the beginning of the round change. Mm-hmm. I'm happy with that as well. I'm not happy with let's just chuck a bunch of dice and see who wins.
I definitely like there to be a lot of strategy in games and having to think stuff out, but I don't necessarily mind like some other stuff thrown in. Normally because I'm normally the person teaching the game, and I'm normally the person who has more experience, so I don't necessarily mind when games throw me curveballs, I guess, because I don't want to be the guy who knows the game best always winning the game, because then I won't have people to come back to the table to play the game with me, because you can only win so many times, and then everybody's like, no. And I also like to play those games where it gives the players the agency to jump on the person who's winning, which is also often me. And I actually enjoy those games, and I don't mind when the other players, I know it's weird to say, even though, like I said before, I try to talk them out of it, and I try to be like, hey, this person's winning, not me. I don't mind when a game gives the players the agency to work together to topple somebody else's points. Like, I don't know. I find it interesting, and I find the dynamic of discussing what we should do in those situations interesting, because you're not just playing these mechanics on a board, you end up playing each other, sort of, so it's kind of weird.
Yeah, and I have no problem with people ganging up on me if they say, Graeme always wins the game, we're going to gang up, and if I lose because other people kind of work together or saw what I was trying to do,
unless they specifically take the one card away from you and give it to the other person.
Exactly. But if you want to basically mess up my strategy by going to the worker placement game, going there before I need to go, I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that because you are, again, it's that person against person against player versus player, that you are trying to work out what the other person's doing and make sure they don't do as well as you do. which is what I enjoy the most. I prefer the players to do that versus the game, penalizing someone just because they're first or something like that.
We can be like, hey, this person is going to be able to do this really good stuff if we don't stop them. I'm going to grab this resources here. You grab those resources there.
Yeah.
Their chains ended, whatever way or however that means,
Yeah.
It's definitely super interesting. I know there's a lot of people out there that are like, no interaction, no luck, just resources and victory points. And you're just like, whoa. Like that's a really extreme, when it's like you're playing multiplayer solitaire with no luck. It's just kind of like, wow. There
are times I do enjoy that.
Gotcha.
But I need the players to be at the same level.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So then you're kind of like racing to see who can do it, right?
Yeah. Like another good example, it's got more randomness in it, but something like Race for the Galaxy. Mm-hmm. I love Race for the Galaxy.
Yeah.
But I love playing against people who are also good at Race for the Galaxy. Mm-hmm. Because for me, Race for the Galaxy is not only playing my game, but trying to piggyback on the game you're playing.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And again, people that are familiar with the game, they're all doing that. Like, is Roy going to be taking this action so I don't have to take that action? I can actually play something else. Is he going to do produce and I can do something else?
Right.
Or do I need to do produce? I'd love to do that with Race for the Galaxy, but again, you need everybody kind of at the same level. So you're
or else all they do is explore every single turn, and you're like, come on, dude, stop exploring. Like, figure out a better way to get cards. Like,
yeah. Yeah.
That's the noob move. You always see them just like explore every single round. And then Race for the Galaxy, the card game, is the only game I've ever had someone just quit, like get up and walk away from, just because the iconography was too much for them. Like it's rough.
Yeah, it is. Now, I mean, I've played it so often that it's kind of second nature to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The only game I've ever played that someone's quit, and it was my wife. We were playing Through the Ages, the new story of civilization.
Yeah.
And that actually has an option that you can quit the game if you're doing really poorly.
Oh,
and it was I think 4 of us were playing, and she got caught without a leader.
Gotcha.
Because it was the first time playing. She wasn't sure that when the leaders when you have to change your leaders and all that. And I said, there is a valid option in the game that you can basically quit. She goes, really? Quit? She's gone.
That's so strange. Like, it has quitting written into the rule book?
Yeah.
Huh. Do you still like get to count out points or do some sort of anything for it, or is it just kind of like no, you just bow out?
Essentially, it's a way that you can bow out, because I forget which age we were in, but she was stuck. There was nothing she could do. There's really no point for her to continue. And there's something in the rulebook that allows you to basically bow out of the game.
Oh, that's crazy, man. Yeah, mine was he had saved up a whole bunch of cards to try to play a world down from his hand that had a whole bunch of it was a really like high number, and he tried to play it down, and I'm like, you can't discard cards for that. That's a warfare world. And he was just like, done. I'm out. No more. Yeah. Like, I literally spent like 4 turns trying to build up to put this thing down, and there's no possible way I can put it down. So it's kind of like, well, I don't necessarily blame you. I'm sorry. It's definitely a weird game,
Didn't you see it's not the same circle as all the other planets?
Exactly. You try to explain that sort of thing. You're like, it has a red like glow on. Like, it doesn't work. It's like when you're that far in and you've spent multiple turns working on building up this thing, and with just goes like, well, these cards you can discard cards to play them. These you have to have warfare built up. I mean, that was explained, but there's a lot of things to explain in that game. It's not new player friendly. You should probably now there's an alternative to teach somebody to like jump drive or something like that first to get them familiar with some of the concepts of the game and maybe some of the icons a little bit, and then be like, okay, now we're going to dive into race. Or maybe even roll, because roll is probably easier not to mess up. I don't like roll as much as I like the card game, but...
I don't like roll, period.
Really?
Yeah.
You're like, dice, evil, bad.
No, it's not just that. I love race so much.
Gotcha.
That roll is for me, like an ugly stepchild. Like, I don't want to play that. Just if I'm going to play that style of game, I'm going to play race.
Yeah, I think race is better anyway. So
yeah,
there's Roy and Graham's review on race roll. Did you ever play the jump drive one, the super quick version?
I own it. I just never played it.
It's really just like slam down some cards. You play developments or you play planets, and like it's like really quick. But it's like a good starting off point if you're trying to get somebody into like the Race for the Galaxy sort of thing, you know.
Okay. I will have one of these days. I will have to get that off the table. I bought it because I thought my wife might enjoy it, but I actually convinced her to play because after I played with her a couple of times, she hated it because I was winning all the time. Because I don't want to play this game anymore. I played a 2-player game with her, a couple two-player games with her, and she actually started to enjoy it more because she was kind of seeing the strategy. So now she was willing to play Race for the Galaxy again.
And the 2-player one's really fun because you get to pick 2 cards at the same time.
Yeah, that's an interesting alternative. I like playing with 3 or 4 players though.
Oh yeah.
More 2's good, but to get the full enjoyment out of it, I like the 3 and 4 player games.
Yeah. Good stuff. So Graeme, what are like your favorite, like if you had like a favorite game or like a couple favorite games, what would you say are like the games that are like your go-to?
My favorite, this is a good discussion because I'll ask you this for a second, Roy. If you have 2 games that you absolutely love, but one is very, very difficult to get to the table and one is much easier to get to the table, which would be your favorite game?
I have the exact thing. Twilight Imperium was my favorite game for a really long time, and I love Twilight Imperium, and I'd probably say it's still one of my favorite games. I love that game, but it is insanely hard to get to the table. I normally only can play it once a year because it's like you have to carve out a day or at least half a day to play the game. And I was playing Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea so much that I'm just like, I play this all the time. It gives me a lot of the same feel, even though it's not the same, because it doesn't have... There's a lot of things that aren't in Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea that are in Twilight Imperium. But I play it way more, and I am like, I have to promote this, since I play it more, to my favorite, you know?
Yeah. So my 2 are Food Chain Magnet, and the other one is Trajan.
Gotcha.
And I think I'd actually put Trajan ahead of Food Chain Magnet because it's much easier to get to the table. It's less intimidating, but I love Trajan. So those are very 2 different games I find. But there is some randomness in Trajan, but not a lot. But the whole, again, working out what you want to do with the limited resources, limited turns is just something I enjoy.
Gotcha. Are there any games that have come out this year that you've been excited about or stoked, or maybe that you're stoked to like try to play?
I should have a look at my Essen list.
Oh yeah, right.
Actually, one of the games that came out at the end of last year was Crusaders: Thy Kingdom Come. That I didn't know anything about until I played it, and by what's his name, Jaffe, I think it is. And I didn't know much about it. I played it, and I loved that game.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's always
From
nice.
Tasty Minstrel?
Yes. And it's always nice when you're in the reviewing realm, and you come across a game that you don't know anything about, and it turns out to be something that you end up really liking. Because I find a lot of the games that I like, I knew I was going to like because, watching Tom talk about them or reading the press release on them or something else, you kind of go, yeah, this looks like a game I'm going to enjoy. So it's always nice to have those unexpected good games that kind of come out and you go, wow, this was actually quite fun.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's awesome. I'm rarely surprised by stuff like that because, I mean, sometimes we'll play games. Now that I'm part of the channel, I get to play a bunch more random games than I'm like, I have no clue what this is. I normally expect them to be bad because we're always playing random stuff. But it's always cool, like, back when I would just watch reviews to try to figure out what was good and what wasn't. Majority of the time, I wouldn't necessarily... I would try to do everything I could to avoid playing bad games,
Yeah, I mean, I just played Ceylon, the game about tea in Sri Lanka. But that was on my Essen list from last year. So even though it's a brand new game, it's like I've been waiting for this game to come out for like a year and a bit now.
Yeah.
So it's very odd watching so much of the news come in that you kind of prejudge a lot of games. Like I should like this, I should like that, I'm not going to like this. So it's an interesting times.
Oh yeah, for sure. Do you do much like backing of Kickstarters or anything like that, or?
I used to.
You had to quit the habit?
Well, one of the reasons why, and if there's any other Canadians watching or listening,
I'm sure.
The shipping to Canada is outrageous.
I'm
you
sure.
Can get it. So I'm in Toronto. Toronto's right across the lake from Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 2.5 hour drive from Toronto to Buffalo. You can get free delivery of games to Buffalo. They cross the border and it will cost like $30.
Wow.
I'm like, okay, so your Kickstarter game is in US dollars. I understand that's a US company, whatever else, and it's $60 US.
Mm-hmm.
But then I have to pay another $30 to get it into Canada. Or I can just wait for it to hit the shelves and pay $50 to $60 Canadian to buy it.
Yeah.
So it makes Kickstarters really, really hard to back when you're having to pay that much of a premium on the games.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's just
we get really lucky just in the U.S. in general for like the whole shipping and stuff. I know things are abysmal for like Australia and things like that. It's like, man, it is hard to get games over there without like putting a second mortgage on your house just to back a Kickstarter, just for the shipping alone,
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's places all over. I wonder the difference, like if Europe is as bad, or it's probably still pretty bad compared to the U.S., seeing that a lot of the companies are based in the U.S.
But I think the other reason is now Canada is the world's second largest country, but there's only 36 million Canadians that live across here, and Canada Post has to have a network that goes right across from coast to coast.
Mm-hmm.
That's expensive to do when you don't have that many people to fulfill. So if you look at like England or European countries, there's 36 million people in a very small area. So it's the shipping
got the postal infrastructure built better, right?
Exactly, yeah. Even getting stuff from coast to coast in Canada is expensive just because you either have to fly it or drive it.
And you're normally having to have a plow on the front of your if it comes in the winter months, you got to have a plow on the front of your delivery service.
Especially for the prairie provinces, in the winter they get hit hard.
I used to work at Target, right, when they were doing that whole Canada thing. They're like, we're invading Canada, building all these stores. They didn't realize how hard it was going to be just to send their trucks from one store to the other, and they ended up shutting them all down, which is crazy, That's a huge faux pas.
In the last 10, 15 years, we've had so many large American companies figure we're going to come to Canada and be the dominant retailer there. Sam's Club is another good example. And we don't have the population density that you guys do.
Right.
Like in Toronto where I live, it's a very large metropolitan area. There's only 5 million people. And if you build a Sam's Club or a Target, there used to be a Target near me, you're not going to get the volumes you do down in the U.S. There's not the people here to do that.
And it's hard just to get trucks down the road because the roads are icy, It's like, hey, we've got the whole, like during the winter months, it's like, I'm sure you guys have a lot of great road care, but I guess if there's less people, you might not need it as much. It's just like, learn to drive on it, yo.
Yeah, well, so the major highway in Toronto is the 401 highway. It comes right across the lake. It's North America's busiest highway. Because we have, if you're going to be shipping stuff to Canada by truck, they're more than likely going to be coming across the 401.
Gotcha.
And it is an absolute disaster.
And I heard that once you get across the border, you have to then carry it. You get out of your vehicle and you have to ride a moose the rest of the way.
Well, you either ride a moose or you're forced to have maple syrup in your car.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
One or the other.
It's like if you don't have maple syrup, get out.
Yeah.
That's
and
awesome.
If not, we'll give you a bottle of maple syrup just to make your drive easier.
That's awesome, man. Well, we've reached an hour, which is normally about where we end these things. I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show, Graeme. Hopefully, people that enjoy your reviews, enjoy your podcast, enjoy your deep dives whenever we have those, we'll check it out more. Do you have anything else coming up that you'd like to talk about or pitch to people?
I guess just the pitching the podcasts. So there's 2 podcasts that my friend Dean Liggett and I do. One is Talking Across the Game Board, which can be found on the Four Corners stream. So if you find that, there's that stream. The one I do with Dean Liggett is called Board Game Buffet. That is not on the Dice Tower Network. Gotcha. And it's a little more segment oriented. So we do a segment, like we might do a top 5 list, but then we'll do a coffee talk. There we actually are starting to talk to different people in the industry.
Nice.
So we had one with the owner of Academy Games. We have one hopefully with Jonathan Gilmore coming out soon.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, so things like that, and of course my reviews on the Dice Tower Network. Should be having another, I think, 2 next week. So that will be too much Graeme Anderson for the Dice Tower.
Yeah, I know. I saw. I think. What's your next review? The
Sherlock Files is my next one.
Gotcha. I saw. Wasn't there that beer one coming up? What's that game called?
Homebrewers after
Homebrewers?
that.
Gotcha. Yeah. I know I saw that one on the schedule, so I'm like, hey, I just edited this for Tom. Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for coming on, and thanks everybody for joining us and checking this out. I stream these on the Dice Tower Facebook page, so if anybody wants to check that out, I stream these Monday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and also these, of course, get posted on the Dice Tower YouTube channel, and then there's also a podcast feed for this, so if you search Spaces Between on iTunes or any of your other podcasting things out there, you can actually listen to the audio, and Graham's voice can lull you to sleep at night. At least for this episode. You just have to have it on repeat, and then you'll be good to go.
So, good night, everybody.
Good night. See you later. Bye.
Thanks so much for watching another Dice Tower video. If you enjoy our videos, subscribe to the channel for more fun, comprehensive board game coverage. Also, consider joining us at one of our events. Come to Dice Tower Retreat, a small, intimate gathering where gaming is king. Join us for Dice Tower Cruise, the largest board game cruise. Attend Dice Tower West in Las Vegas for gaming fun on the West Coast, or Dice Tower East in Orlando in sunny Florida. Dice Tower Conventions, the friendliest gaming conventions on Earth. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.